Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see about the moral approach with regard to literature and moral ideas. Moral approach dates back to a long history. Plato, in his Ideal Republic, has expressed his concern about the poets effectively using the moral effects. Horace also gives weightage to the usefulness, as well as he says that poetry is something which actually exerts beauty. Sir Philip Sidney was similarly concerned. Dr. Johnson, in his The Lives of the Poets, discusses the moral content of the writers. Matthew Arnold argued the importance of the high seriousness of art. The importance of literature is not merely in its way of saying, but also in what it says. The dichotomy, often expressed as form and content, which is seen in all the literary works, has been for our time an important one, since the formalists have argued for the heavy emphasis in the practice of criticism upon the way of saying, the arrangement of the parts, the how of a poem's meaning, while moral critics have attended to the what of meaning. In the 20th century, the impulse towards moral evaluation has been expressed chiefly by the neo-humanist. Their chief interest lies in literature as a criticism of life. They are concerned with the ends of literature as affecting man, with literature as it takes place in the human forum of ideas and attitudes. Their analysis of man is traditional, going back to that of the Renaissance humanist. Accordingly, man is different from animal because he has a capacity to reason and he is possessing ethical standards. Man stands a free being and therefore he is prone to animalistic urges or egocentric yaws, but is always under the control of reason. Freedom thus means not only liberation from circumstances but subjection to inner law. So, the watchwords of humanism are order, restraint, and discipline. The 20th century literary movement, which associated itself with this philosophical position, was originally American. Paul Elmer More had been writing since 1904 when the first of his Shelburne essays appeared, and Irving Babbitt took a parallel position with literature and the American College in 1908. The growing assault on the past naturally included an attack on those who, like Babbitt and Moore, defended the past. It was difficult for them to make headway in a time of skepticism towards traditional values and of self-expressive experiments in arts. But in the 20s, they were joined by a number of writers like Norman Forster, Harry Hayden Clark, G.R. Eliot, Robert Sheffer, Frank Jewett Mather, Gorgon Munson, and for a time Stuart Sherman Pratt. Together, they made the school neo-humanist. They all opposed two tendencies. One is naturalism and another is romanticism. They opposed naturalism because it had its debased view of man, denying him free will and responsibility. And they opposed romanticism because, with its excessive cultivation of the ego and sympathy, with completely unrestrained expression, was opposed to their ideas. To some opponents, the neo-humanists seemed reactionary in nature, while their strong sense of morality led to a change of ethical hyper-orthodoxy. Yet many of these neo-humanists strove chiefly to unite moral earnestness based on a thoughtful and dignified concept of man's nature with aesthetic sensibility. The end of the movement occurred in the early 30s because the newer ontological and sociological approaches attracted the younger critics. Adding to it was Babbitt's death in 1933 and Moore's in 1937, and therefore humanism underwent a rebirth with modification into religious humanism. Early in the century, T.A. Hume had expressed a division between his own position and that of the neo-humanists, although he was strongly as opposed as they to the softness and confusion of romanticism. The difference then came down to this: whether the moralist would or would not acknowledge supernatural sanction for the moral standards he held up to the arts. The neo-humanists themselves were unsettled about the question. Paul Elmer More became associated with institutional religion, and G.R. Eliot declared positively the necessity of an alliance between religion and morality, and by and large, the group followed Babbitt's lead in remaining secular or religiously non-committal. In 1927 and 1929, T.S. Eliot forcefully criticized both Babbitt and Forster for this central weakness as he saw it. Morality that has no vindication outside of itself cannot compel reasonable belief. The result of this intramural turmoil was finally to incorporate the warrant of religious persuasion into the recommendation of moral standards. So when the movement died in its early form, the values still survive, chiefly in alliance with religion. The term Christian humanist, for example, may just be applied to T.S. Eliot and is frankly accepted by a number of scholars and critics like Edmund Fuller and Hyatt Wagner as indicating the focus of the critical view. F.R. Lewis among English critics and Weir Winters among Americans expressed the traditional concern for the moral ends of literature. Furthermore, much of the criticism of Marxists is at moral base, though the image of man they propose differs from that of the humanists and is related to so special a theory of human forces that the Marxists are best understood as exemplars of the social approach. Even among some of the formalist critics, the moral view is retained. In religion and literature, T.S. Eliot enunciated an interesting split of judgment. The greatness of literature cannot be determined solely by literary standards, though we must remember that whether it is literature or cannot be determined only by literary standards. This distinction makes it possible for some, like Alan Tate and John Crowe Ransom, who have the moralist interest in the greatness of literature, to concentrate in their critical explanations on the solely literary standards. If you have anything more to add on to what I've said, please write it in the comment box, like the video, share it with your friends, and if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe and support. Thank you.